Welcome back, everyone, into a new video in this video series for what's new in the SQL library for Allen Bradley PLCs. We are gonna see some of the new features, differences in SQL-Custom. And what has been added, and what we can do with this particular add-on instruction in the library. So, with no further delays, let's start. So I have here the SQL-Custom L. This is from version L, and as I was mentioning throughout these videos, we have version S as well. So let's first mention some of the differences between the version L and version S. The version S, with version S, you can have up to 2,000 characters for your query. So remember that. So that's one of the limitations. So in here, in your custom query for version S, you can have up to 2,000 characters. Now you might see here that this can go only up to 480, but as we're going to see here in a little bit, we can change that. But just keep in mind, for version S, you can go up to 2,000 characters. You can certainly go higher than that, but if you do so, the add-on instruction will just default to 2,000. In other words, your query will not work if you pass that. And typically, once you get to that, like 1800, 1850 characters, you may want to start to think about upgrading to version L versus using version S. And yes, if you have version S, or if you, let's say, started with version S and you found out that you need version L, you can certainly upgrade to version L. Now with version S still, you have also another limitation on the response. So we saw the limitation here on the query for this parameter. The other limitation is on the response. So the response for the version S, you can have up to 4,095 characters. So, or 96 characters. So you can, let's say if you're doing some query like select, for example, and you're expecting, to read some rows or some data back, then you have up to 4,096 characters that you can get back from the SQL server into this response. As you can see here, you have 4,096 as we mentioned for your response. So that's another limitation, and that's very important to keep those numbers in mind. So for your query, it's up to 2,000 characters. For your response, is up to 4,096 characters or bytes that you can get back from your server. Now for the version L, you have a higher limit than version S. So for version L, you can go up to 8,000 in here for your query. So it could be a really large query. And then for your response, you can go up to 16,192. And you're going to hear that that number quite a bit throughout these videos. So again, for version L, the limit is 8,000 characters for your, or bytes for your query, and up to 16,192 for your response. Now keep in mind that to use these large, these large queries and large responses like that, you must enable in the login. If you watched the previous video about the login, there is a parameter that has been added in the login that I talked about, which is enable large packets, and that's available under the config, and that this one here. So if you don't enable this, even if you have the L version and you're trying to have a query that large, it will not work. You must enable this for to use something that large like that. Okay, so that's one of the differences between the SQL-Custom L and Custom S. So those are the differences, and in fact, that's the only really differences between the two in terms of capabilities. Now I should mention also that in general, version L, it's not compatible with the 5370 series of compact logics. So if you have the compact logics 5370 series, you must use version S. You cannot use version L. It will not work, and that's just a limitation of the compact logics itself processor. So you have to use version S, and that's all explained and documented in the user guide that I talked about in the introductory video in this series. So keep that also in mind. The other parameters or the other features has been added. So we added this capacity exceeded. So if you get into a situation where maybe you set up this higher than what need to be, and you have a version S or maybe version L, and you want really high, this capacity exceeded, it will tell you that, hey, you exceeded your capacity of what you can do in your query. So you have to adjust your query to basically meet the limitation so it can be executed. And then in the same way, we have this response too large that will tell you if the response that we're getting back from that query from the SQL server, it's too large, we can't basically save it back to our response here, then we will tell you that in this bit in here. So that's about the some of the features that's been basically added to the SQL-Custom. Now, what I want to talk about is how can you basically customize your SQL-Custom depending on your needs. As like we talked about, like right now here, I have only ability to go up to 480 for my query. So for example, if I throw a query like this, it will be most likely, so no problem, because this query it only has 350 characters and I have up to 480, so I'm golden, I'm good to go. So I can click OK, and I say OK, and then I can say OK, let's try to execute this. It's going to try to execute it, and when it did that, it says there is an SQL error. So now let's find out what is that SQL error, because as I mentioned in my previous video, that's also that SQL error message, it has been incorporated to all the other add-on instruction, not just the login, and the SQL-Custom is not an exception. So as we can see here, it tells me exactly what's going on. It said could not find the stored procedure SP insert case. Well, that's simply because when I put the query here, I just didn't specify the database where this stored procedure resides. So if I do that, so in my database, it's called cartridge DBO, and now if I hit apply and hit OK, and I turn this off to try again, we can see now under connection that I have another SQL error, but this time it says you have a violation of primary constraint in this field. So what happens now, it's basic and not insert duplicate, so which is really cool, because now I know exactly what's going on. So basically I try to execute this multiple times that it trigger that violation of the primary key of that table. So there we go. Now, but what if my query is way more than 350 characters? So if we want to do something that large, what I have to do, I'm just going to first save here. I'm going to have to go offline, and then although the add-on instruction will be locked, assuming you purchase just a single license, for example, if I go here to the data type and I go to the user defined, I can come here to the SQL setup, and then I'm going to say I'm going to go to, let's say 2000, for example, or actually I'm going to go higher than that. I'm going to go 4000. So with that has been said, I have to use version L to be able to handle something this high. In fact, once I passed it to the 2000 or even about 1800 or 1900, that I need to use the version L. The version S will not be able to handle it. So I'm going to say apply, yes. And then when I did that, I'm going to go to, so that's about the parameter I have to change in there. Now in the buffer data here, if let's say I'm expecting a response that's going to be higher than 4096, then I can come here and I can change this to 16192. But for my purpose right now, I don't expect to get like really large response, so 4096 is good enough for me. So I'm going to leave that as it is. And now if I go here to my custom, I'm going to see that now I can have up to 4000 characters, and the add-on instruction will adapt automatically for whatever the size you put in here of your query. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to download my new my program here, but with now the SQL-Custom has more capability, and that's one of actually the cool features of this library, of this new generation of this library, is you have the ability to customize your add-on instruction, the sizes, per your needs. And we're going to see that also once we talk about the select or the insert or the update. We're going to see how they all have those same capabilities in terms of sizing up your add-on instruction per your need. So now I'm going to say yes, and now I'm going to grab a big, basically query. It's a sort procedure that I want to execute, and it is, I'm going to put it here. Okay, so this one is like 3200 characters, so it's quite large. So I'm going to say apply. Now keep in mind that the SQL login has the large packet enabled. Okay, And just for fun, I'm actually going to disable this to see what will happen with such a large packet. I'm going to turn this, toggle this, so I can re-log in with the new parameter disabled. So I just logged in, and now I'm going to say, okay, I want to execute this. Once I try to do that, what I will get is I will keep getting essentially just COM error. And basically what's happening is the SQL will not basically be able to process such a large query right now because we did not enable the large packets request. Now let's go back to the login and let's enable that parameter, turn it on, hit apply, and then once we do that, we will see that now it's not complaining the COM error about the COM error. And if we go back in here to connections, we can see that we have now an SQL error right there of violation. Now let's try to do that again, and certainly we see here we have an SQL error, and we can see it's incremented, and basically we already have a transaction in there, and that's why it's giving us that error. Well, that's it for me, folks, on this one. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.